Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the Golden Opportunities Coaching YouTube channel. Welcome to those of you who are new. We've got over 800 of these available for your listening pleasure on a variety of topics. We are here as many times per week as we can be, sometimes daily, most times several times per week. Anyway, in order to give you a good run of ideas about psychological, emotional, coaching related topics, if there's a topic you'd like to see covered that hasn't been, or one that you'd like to see covered in more detail, please feel free to reach out. You can do that through Twitter at PO Perception, or you can do it here in the About Me section of this page or in the comment section. But the About Me section or the comment or the Twitter will get you in touch with me if you're looking for coaching. And I do everything from relationships to business owners, business builders, entrepreneurs, and habit change and all sorts of fun things. Been doing that for 14 years, so been around a little bit. Anyway, in any event, would love to be of service to you if I can be. How do you know if you're in a toxic environment? There's about six or seven things I want to go through here. The first is you're not allowed to express opinions that are outside of the norm or outside of other people who are you're around. So the idea is you either agree with me or you don't exist, and so that becomes a dominant thing in a way in which a person uh, in which a person kind of approaches the world, and then that level of stress, that level of toxicity, bleeds over into how everyone kind of interacts, and it's not necessarily a good thing, and it's also not necessarily a thing that really leads anywhere. And so lack of expression becomes toxic because then a person loses their self identity or their perception of self identity on a pretty consistent basis. And it happens sometimes within a couple of months, other times within, several months or even a couple of years. But people lose themselves and they don't realize that they are out of balance. They also don't realize that their viewpoint for themselves or for their future is unhealthy, and then it takes a good bit of time to kind of balance things again and get to a place where it feels like, hey, this is worth it. My life is worth it, or standing up for myself is worth it. And so issues with self worth also become a major factor. The next is drama. So, if you are constantly expecting drama, constantly expecting to have to put out emotional fires or um, modify how you speak to people, modify how you approach people, what you do, how you do it, and all of that, that becomes another major issue for a variety of reasons. And this usually happens because people are hypersensitive or controlling. Hypersensitive for a person that doesn't know what they're doing, controlling for a person that does. But regardless, that toxic behavior that goes back and forth and back and forth um, causes a person to change who they are in order to keep the peace, and then again self-identity gets lost through the process without many times without even realizing it, and ultimately there are challenges related to that going forward. And so that becomes problematic for a number of people and a number of reasons. When a person begins to understand the value of kind of changing that behavior or finding a way to change that behavior, then a person can begin to understand how to regain control of their life. But if they don't know that their life or emotions are out of control, that can become problematic for any number of reasons. In any event, the next thing to kind of look at from that perspective ultimately becomes kind of how do we, um, you know, avoid that toxic nature. And the thing is telling the truth. So a lot of lies. So lies on both sides. Lies from the person who's trying to control the situation, but also lies from the person who's trying to keep the peace. And that's where things become really quite unfriendly and often quite toxic. The need to lie in order to survive in the environment, especially if a person has an undiagnosed, untreated, or denied mental illness. This, in order to navigate life with them, lying almost becomes a prerequisite to emotional survival. And so, if you're dealing with a toxic person, and many toxic people, I won't say all, but many toxic people do have underlying mental health conditions that need, or at the very least, perceptual shifts that need to happen in order for them to live more healthily. And so, lying just to get by, whether it's, I'm going to lie so you don't yell at me, I'm going to lie so you don't physically or mentally abuse me, I'm going to lie so you don't, manipulate me with negative emotions. But the process of lying becomes almost a expectation. Like I have to lie in order to survive this environment. That's a toxic environment for sure. The next is the understanding of control. So the use of emotion or the use of intimidation, threat, and other forms of control mechanisms are a predominant way of kind of moving forward, and that can be super toxic and unhealthy. So finding a way to kind of get to a place wherein um, wherein things are a little difficult or taken off balance. It doesn't necessarily mean that one party is good, the other party is bad. It also doesn't mean that a control mechanism isn't just a fear mechanism pushed onto someone else. So understand that when a person is being controlling, there's something they're fearing and trying to avoid. That doesn't mean their behavior is correct or justifiable, but it's easier to understand from that perspective, because when we understand that every controlling mechanism is just a way to avoid a certain circumstance or situation, it becomes much easier to deal with in a manner that's a little more even keeled and balanced. The next thing to look at in this situation is no boundaries. So you can have a conversation in a toxic environment and think things are going to change, and then you're right back where you started a day or two later, or a week later, whatever have you. So understanding of how something is affecting a person doesn't necessarily lead to behavioral modification and change from the controlling or abusive individual. And so if you're in a situation where you think you had a breakthrough and then you didn't days or weeks later, it's just a sign that you're in a toxic environment. And so making an action plan to get out of the environment, or at least to understand how to navigate it until you can leave the environment, is there as a need factor. And then the last one is constant put downs, insults, or belittling of your accomplishments. So if a person is uncomfortable that you're somehow, quote, better than them, and better and worse are just human concepts that don't really exist in the world outside of perception. In other words, a person can say, I'm better than you, and it's like, okay, in what way and how and who determines that? So the concepts of better and worse don't actually exist unless we allow them to, but the illusion of competition that relates to how people quantify their level of personal importance does give in to those perceptions, and so that's ultimately there, and that's that. So hopefully this is helpful. I encourage you to continue reaching out and continue connecting on a deeper level. In any event, I hope that this has been helpful. Until next time, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment.